Welcome, class, to our asynchronous video tutorial in our media production techniques class, column 4123. And if you'll recall, we've been promoting heavily on our schedule site visit from not just a videographer, but someone that specializes in, has training certification in drone photography, and she has utilized this as an independent photographer, but also as an experimental mode of capturing media and sharing it. She has a lot of active projects that relate to history. She's trained as a historian in addition to a photographer, and so it's fun to see how people are blending types of media. It's a very nice day outside, and we had a goal of potentially doing a little bit of an outdoor field trip in hour number 2. But before then, and depending on our turnout, as we record this session, she's going to come up. She's going to give us a little bit of knowledge base, right? She's going to introduce some technology concepts, right? Some equipment, basically, and kind of help contextualize that for us, and maybe give us a little talk about some of the credentialing. I think she even has a clip or two produced. She's going to share with us to kind of just showcase some of the work, some of the labor that goes into that. So, if you will, we're going to welcome up Trina Arnold. Trina Arnold is going to talk to us about her experiences, and that will be our early program here.
I thank you very much for welcoming me today. I really appreciate it. All right, so I'm going to share my screen here and bring up a little PowerPoint just to give you all some information and some updates on our new restrictions from the FAA. And I say restrictions very lightly, not only restrictions until you get certified for many things, but the operations over people, which is very true, right? And so when you're doing drone, you need to be very careful and mindful of where you're actually shooting, because again, not everybody wants their face or whatever in a public space through YouTube or whatever media outlet that they're doing. So, of course, April 21st, 2021, drone pilots operating the Part 107 may fly at night over people and moving vehicles without a waiver, as long as they meet the requirements defined in the rule. Of course, the airspace authorizations are still required for night operations in controlled airspace under 400 feet. So in Oklahoma City here, we have a lot of meta flights. We have our police helicopter that patrols through the area, and so be very mindful of the airspace, and so that we're not creating possible hazards for these some lifeline and emergency situations. So as of September 16th, 2023, the FAA has also updated their compliance data for a remote ID. And the FAA understands that some drone pilots may not be able to comply because of limited availability of broadcast modules, but the lack of approved FAA recognized identification areas is also an issue. From some of these people have older drones that do not have this remote ID already in the software. And so if you have a drone that's usually you bought in 2022, somewhere around there, they should have this remote ID already in the software. Drone DJI, for instance, what I have, it does have that. And so there are certain requirements that you have to do, and everybody has to be definitely in compliance by March 16th, 2024, or otherwise you can face hefty fines and possibly even prison time. So that's something we don't want to have. All right, so definitions. An unmanned aircraft means an aircraft operated without the possibility of direct human intervention or within or on the aircraft. So as well as doing an unmanned aircraft, as you're looking at your remote control, you must also have a spotter next to you, someone who is a visual observer who can, keep that drone in their line of vision at all times. And that's important too for many reasons. Of course, here at Mackey, where we're close to the airport. And we're also close to other sites and facilities. And so these things are very important to understand. So a safety event reporting. And Gary, you said something. He's left. No later than 10 calendar days after an operation that meets a criteria or paragraph of this section. Okay, and so if there's an incident, you have to report it. Okay, within 10 days. If there's serious injury to any person or they lost consciousness, damage to any property, or other small unmanned. All right, and the cost of repair, including materials and labors, does not exceed $500. And of course, fair market value property does not exceed 500 in event of a total loss. So again, if you crash, it's okay, but you need to report it. Under the for recreational flyers, which this is the majority of people, you have to have a current registration. All right, you have to be flying for recreational purposes only, meaning not for money. You have to follow safety guidelines in community-based organizations. And, again, you have to keep your drone within the visual line of sight and do not interfere with any other manned aircraft. And so if you do, you're the one that has to lower your aircraft and let others have the right of way. Just like in a car, when you're, merging on the highway, you have to give people, the right of way. You have to fly at or below 400 feet in controlled airspace and only with prior authorization. So here at MACU, we are in a geospace zone necessarily. And so there's an app you can get and it will give you permissions to fly here and there, but it also lets others in this community-based organizations, for instance, FAA people, emergency people, including fire or police, have access to your drone once you register it with the FAA, which is only $5. It's 3 years. But anyways, so and again, comply with all airspace restrictions. And then, of course, pass the recreational UAS safety test. This is not a hard test. It's 15 to 30 minutes. You read a bunch of questions and you will have a knowledge-based quiz based on those questions. And then once you pass that certification, it will give you an FAA certification code, and that is what you will put. You will have to put that number on your drone, and that way, if it crashes somewhere, they will have it. So of course, before you get out and go flying, you need to check the weather. Check for high winds, poor visibility, turbulence, all can make a drone more difficult to fly and control, especially depending on how big or how small your drone is. So in certain conditions, ice can form on the drone, which can make your drone heavier or fly in unexpected ways. Cloud cover, the sun's angle can also make it harder for you to when you're flying. Look for obstacles, trees, power lines, buildings, and other people. It's easy to not see power lines in many ways. I've been close to hitting a few power lines myself, not realizing they were that close where I was at. And so some drones have obstacle sensors on it that will alert you. Some drones do not. And so, if you have a drone that does not have any of these obstacle sensors on there, whether in their bottom or on the sides, in their front and the back. There's different ones have different sensors all around or just in the certain places. Be sure that, again, you are aware of your surroundings, and concentrating on your flight and avoiding distractions will help avoid collisions, which is why you always need a visual spotter beside you. Losing signal from weak interference is also an obstacle that you face when flying a drone. There are a lot of power lines which also interfere, and so if you're around a place with a lot of power lines, it more likely is going to interfere with your signal. And so does your drone have a GPS where it identifies your home place? It will come back automatically. If it doesn't, what do you do in the event that you lose a signal and it drops straight to the ground? And so all of these are, very real situations that you need to be aware of before you start flying your drone. In basic thing, be aware of your surroundings. So plan to do what you'll do if you lose a signal. Again, does it have, find your drone? Most DJIs and others have, I guess, GPS, where you can find my drone, and as long as there's power to it, you can use that GPS locator to find where it went down. Practice flights. This is cannot be said enough. Go out and practice. Just because you get your drone day one doesn't mean that you're an expert flyer. So go out and test it. Go to an area with very few obstacles. It's open field and fly around. How does it fly? How does it go up and down? Did you calibrate it correctly? Is it flying heavy on one side or the other? Is it wobbling a lot? Is it not staying? When you put it in just sitting there, just not moving. Is it moving? Is it shifting to one side or the other? And if it is, then you need to go back and recalibrate it. Again, practice flying up and down and sideways, because what you think is right or left may not be right or left. It's sometimes the opposite of what you think it is. And so just be aware that where you're flying to is where you want to go. And so it's also a good idea to get some practice flights. And for instance, DJI, it keeps track of all my flights, my flight time, just like you would if you're a pilot, because you are a pilot. You're flying an unmanned aircraft, and so all the rules that apply to manned aircraft still are also with unmanned aircraft as well. And so the new FAA rules with this remote identification, it's like a digital license plate for drones. So drone acquiring registration must be equipped with a remote ID or fly inside an FAA recognized identification zone, or FRIA. Those are few and far between right now. The FAA is working on getting more of those areas certified. There are a few here in Oklahoma City. One is out at Hefner Lake. There is a little airfield where people do model airplanes, and so they fly around, and that is basically a recognized identification zone. Drones weighing 0.55 pounds or less are flown under the exception for limited recreation rules. And so those are those little tiny drones. Mine kind of meets that. It's kind of on the cusp. And so at that point, it's just best to, make sure everything is registered, identified. That way, there's just no questions if something would happen that you have to identify later and could possibly be fined for, based on how they weigh your drone. Okay. And so you'll fly a standard remote IG again as of September 16th. It should be 23. Manufacturers are required to equip drones for sale in the United States with a remote ID. And so, that's 20. So fly a drone with a remote ID broadcast module. If you don't have one, those are for those little radio airplanes. And so most of those are not equipped with remote ID. And so you'll have to get an external device to be able to attach to that. So that signal is broadcast to those around you. And so fly within, again, those FRIA zones. And, FRIAs only permit you to fly without a remote ID. They are not an airspace authorization zone. Okay. And so that's good to know as well. So FRIA applications are accepted only from FAA recognized CBOs and educational institutions that are approved through the FAA. And so FRIAs are published, of course, on the UAS facility maps. Registration, there's your FAA registration number. That must be attached to your drone. And if it's not and it goes down, they track it to you. You're in trouble if you don't have it listed. Registration costs $5 for 3 years. It's cheap, right? So better be safe than sorry. And so, again, it's pretty quick to go through that little registration and little certification testing on that. And it's pretty painless. Documentation. So if you're asked by law enforcement or FAA personnel, a recreational flyer must provide proof of drone registration and that they have completed that course. I just showed you the link. So all documents must be in paper or electronic format, and recreational flyers must also be able to explain which FAA recognized CBO safety guidelines they are following. Of course, you can follow FAA on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. All right, so recreational flyers under the same exception for limited recreational operations as unmanned aircraft, of course. Register your things to know. Register your drone, right? Operate according within your community-based organizations. Always fly within visual sight. obtain authorization before flying in controlled airspace. You can do this through the DJI Fly app or whatever app you have. Do not fly higher than 400 feet in uncontrolled airspace. And of course, recreational flyers must take a certification available through the FAA or law enforcement officials upon request. So there's several approved online sites through the FAA website that you can take that little certification test. It's pretty painless. Styles of drone photography and video, right? And so you can see here, drones give you a new perspective. And from now you're looking up and you see a lot of space, and you're looking down. As this first photo here, you can see, water, a lot of things, right? And so it gives you some kind of depth of field. You can see in the next space, a lot of these trains, and they're going up. And so again, it's all about perspectives, all about composition and in the style of photography, drone photography that you want to produce. Here it's just a simple aerial, right? It's a sunset or a sunrise of these vast mountains. You just see these huge, fast skyscapes. So some composition rules, in case you're not familiar with photography at all. You want to have balanced images. So break your images into quadrants. Aiming to balance the elements using the rule of thirds as a guide. Use negative space strategically. Boost saturation to pull visual weight, and practice identifying which elements in a photo throw it off balance. Right? Rule of thirds. It is a way of dividing frames for optimal composition. It involves evenly dividing the frame between two equally spaced horizontal and vertical grid lines, creating essentially a 3x3 grid. All right, and so in order to create balance and flow within the image, compositional elements should be placed where these lines of grid intersect with your image. Leading lines, we saw in the previous one, some leading lines with those trains. Photography, flattens 3 dimensions into 2. And so in order to preserve a feeling of space and dimension, a photographer has to be aware of what's in a shot and how they're focusing on the composition. So leading lines are visual elements that pull the viewer's eye toward the subject or a focal point. They can be anything: roads, running off to a distance, an arm outstretched towards something else, tree branches rising toward the moon, anything that pulls the attention toward something else. And these lines surface appearance of depth, dimension, also shape. Depth of field and focus. When drone flying, you definitely have depth of field and focus can be an issue depending on how your drone autofocuses or manual focuses, however you want to, whatever you're comfortable enough with, do that, right? And so depth of field is something that's very, you'll have huge depth of field because you have huge space. But drones now are equipped with cameras that will zoom in and out. And so you can create more depth of field in a lot of ways. Shallow depth of field can give the viewer an impression that they're focused on something immediately in front of them. And it provides a look of, depth and scale. Creating a point of view. Play with your composition, move around, don't just stay in one place. And so as you move around, you'll get changes in light, changes in deep spaces of dark, and everything else in between there. And so change places, change grids, change focal length, change even how you want to do a shallow shot or a high shot. Do it from all angles, and then once you download your content, you can see what you like the most. And then again, just use it. When you're composing a shot, keep in mind how the image is going to be used. What's it going to be marketed for? Is it going to be for TV, television, print photography, commercial photography, advertising? How is it going to be used? And that also will identify how you're going to actually shoot your photo. You can see some other compositions here to drone photography, more of this kind of abstract architectural. Of course, you have a vast landscape, right? You got the reds at the bottom, you got, the earth coming out, and then you got the sun in the background. But also in this little visual, what we hear your grid, and you can see the thirds. And so areas of a photo where users focus first and longest. And you can see here, at the top left is 41%, bottom left is 25, then 20 and 14. Here in America, we read from left to right. And so it's, natural that our vision, our point of where we look at would be to the top left versus the top right in many ways. And so, but it lets you know as a person who's doing media, photography, whatever you do, where people focus first and longest. And so you want to make sure that, if nothing else, that place right here on this top quadrant is in focus. And it has something to draw your eye to the rest of the photograph. And this is where other stuff like leading lines can come in. Just where it'll look first, but it'll lead your eye to other places. All right, and finally, here I've done a little compilation of some video that I've done over the last couple of years, and kind of give you some ideas of shooting areas. This first shot here is in San Antonio. You see the Alamo right here, and I actually think part of this is going to be on a documentary film that I've worked on here and there with a producer in California. So I think I have to share sound to be able to hear it. There we go. Here's Durango, back north and around. This is at Lake Hefner. Sometimes you get lucky. A flock of birds fly over me. This is up in Osage County. Here's the Talamina Mountains. Southeast of Vermont. The only thing when you're shooting, be sure that you're going to take it slow and steady. You don't need to, rocket it off at 30 miles an hour, unless that's what you're intending to do if you're shooting an action shot. But for these wide landscapes, it's just kind of slowly to use that cine look. Here gives you perspective. This is in Broken Bow. You got people at the bottom throwing skipping stones, family time. Talk about depth of field here. We got the boat at the bottom there, showing just how large this landscape around. This is South Padre. And this is here at Lake Overhosher. And when you're doing any kind of video, it's okay just to sometimes just let it sit and let nature happen around you. And so this video, I just let it shoot and record. And then when I post-process it, I end up fast forwarding about 8 times to give the look. And the sunset was just absolutely gorgeous that day. I don't think I've seen one like that since then. We're also, bird migration as well, and so there are a lot of shorebirds coming in and out, and so it just kind of gives you the quiet, sometimes the quiet, the calmness, but just the activity of wildlife. Of course, adding music. Music adds to anything, and it affects the mood. Because music to this video was very ominous, very dark. You would expect it to be outcome. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much to Trina Arnold for once again. Trina is an advanced photographer, videographer, and now drone photography specialist, consultant with filmmakers that are increasingly looking to do work in Oklahoma, and she also happens to have passion for history and teach it on occasion with us at MacU. And so it is great to hear about that process, see some of the steps, right? We don't think about the intricacies. I think we're in a consumer culture mindset where people just want to like click on Amazon, buy the drone, and then like, I don't know, turn it on, send it up, right? It's not quite like those gadgets we see in the malls, right? That they're trying to like sell you that probably will fall apart quickly anyway, run out of batteries, their parts break, right? They're cheap for a reason. But rather it's a process. It's something, there's a reason it takes time to get certified, to learn more about it and so on. So that's very valuable. And thank you to Trina for coming out, for sharing our information on what she does, her passion area. And for those in person, we're going to get a chance to do an on-ground tutorial. We might take this thing out and practice launch point photography right here out in the fields area at MacU, right? And she's very knowledgeable about the areas that they're certifiable versus improper. So we appreciate that and that knowledge and wisdom. You can't just go flying these things anywhere. And so we're grateful for her sharing that knowledge and excited to be able to tackle that objective in our media production techniques class.